Welcome to the Excellence at Work podcast, where we explore the strategies and best practices that drive business success. I'm Rachel Cooke, COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast, along with members of our executive team. In each episode, we'll dive into the latest trends, insights, and real-world examples from some of the most exciting leaders from organizations worldwide. Be part of our journey and learn from the best as we discuss innovative approaches and cutting-edge technologies for talent management, learning and development, leadership, diversity and inclusion, and more. Hi, and welcome to Excellence at Work podcast. I'm Rachel Cooke, the COO of Brandon Hall Group and the host of our podcast. And with me today, I'd like to warmly welcome Neena Newberry, the CEO of Newberry Solutions and founder of New Lens. Hi, Neena. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me on today.
And it's, like I said, I'm really excited to have you with me here today and to share with our listeners and our viewers about your organization and your expertise around coaching and leadership. You had an amazing session at our conference earlier this year, and we're very grateful for you joining and supporting our Excellence Conference, our HCM Excellence Conference. You know, we have such a great opportunity to bring together leaders and different HR, learning, technology professionals from around the world. And so we feel just kind of we're at like the paramount of everyone's success. And we are, just love being able to connect everyone together and hear their success stories, whether it's through their awards programs or through their work experiences, and it really a combination. So, Neena, thank you for your contributions and partnership and sponsorship at our conference. And today we're just kind of continuing that discussion, and I'm going to pick your brain a little bit here about your organization and the work that you do. And before we get started, Neena, maybe share a little bit more about your background, if you could, to our listeners, and share with them so they get to know you a little bit more than what I had just mentioned.
Great. Thank you, Rachel. Well, I'll share a couple of things that may be relevant to the comments that I'm going to be making today as well. So my background is 14 years at Deloitte Consulting. So I got my start really more in the healthcare industry, and I started out pre-med and then ended up going into healthcare on the business side. So that's how I ended up at Deloitte initially. My background includes business strategy consulting, operations consulting, and then I got into the leadership development space or human capital consulting when I, really realized how much people matter in terms of being able to execute on strategy and operational plans. You really have to have the right people with the right skills and the right roles, and it can have such a huge impact on organizations. So I've been focusing on developing top talent for a huge chunk of my career at this point. So I was a consultant, then I was part of Deloitte's US HR executive team for the last 4 years that I was there, out of the 14. And then I started Newberry Solutions in 2008, right before the economy tanked. So perfect timing, but it's this year 17 years. And we work with many Fortune 500 companies, also some mid-market clients as well. But our focus is on developing high-performing leaders through executive coaching, development programs, and then our New Lens leadership development platform, which the whole focus there is about giving more people access to leadership development and the things that are really going to help them be successful. So this is definitely work that I am absolutely passionate about, and it's been really fun. And we also specialize in high-performing women leaders too, so have a niche there as well.
Congratulations. 17 years is quite the milestone. And I can really appreciate that. We had historically, our organization, we've been around for about 31 years now, going on 32. And our current leadership, we had acquired and kind of emerged going back 14 years ago. And previously, we were, few of us came from Burson and had helped develop or help grow the organization and left, before their acquisition or the acquisition of Deloitte. So, I understand kind of the startup mode and doing it a couple of times and trying to scale and grow. It's exciting, and there's a lot of pivots, right, and a lot of shifts
Hmm.
and changes, and
Yes.
but our space, being in the learning and HR space, it's very rewarding, and you work with a lot of great people, and you really do feel, and sometimes also being at a smaller or more boutique organization, you feel like you do make such a great impact, and you have the opportunity to shift or change or adapt quickly if needed. And so that's exciting. I feel. Our research does show the impact that coaching has on change and on leadership and developing people. I forget the actual, but as we continue to do research in leadership and looking at what modalities have the greatest impact, coaching comes up to be, more than 50% show. And that number has not really shifted all that much over the years. It continues to show how important it is when you're developing people as to be able to apply coaching. And now the effectiveness of coaching, that may not always necessarily have companies struggle sometimes with being able to demonstrate the effectiveness if they don't have the right solution or the right way to scale. And so maybe if you can share a little bit about how you've been able to scale coaching and how you've been able to have impact within leadership.
Sure. Well, so coaching, I am a big fan of coaching, but you have to make sure that you are very outcomes oriented in the work that you're doing. And I think that's one thing that we definitely do is not just focus on what are the goals, but really, how will you know? How will you know that this actually worked and that it was really effective? So whether you're doing one-on-one coaching, group coaching, or leveraging a platform like our New Lens leadership development platform to do it, that's a key component of it is where do you see people struggling? Where do you see maybe they have strengths and you can help amplify those strengths as well? And make sure that those are focal points of the work that's actually being done. So, many times what we see is, in organizations, there's a focus on uh, high potentials, high performers, and HBR has published about the leadership development paradox, which is that the people who need the most development get the least. Meaning, if you're not part of that high performing group, and let's say, I mean, you're someone who came in at the same time as someone else and they got designated that way, you didn't, maybe your manager wasn't paying attention. Now, there's a downstream impact of that where, the organization tends to keep investing, in individuals at that are categorized that way. And so you can have some diamonds in the rough, some individuals who get left behind there. So that's part of it is really looking at making sure you're investing in the right ways and thinking more broadly versus just categorizing in the ways that you have been. The other piece that I think we see is a focus on content over learning. And what I mean by that is just providing people with a lot of learning. So, you've got these huge learning management systems, vast libraries of amazing content, LinkedIn Learning, other stuff that's available out there, which is high quality information, but how much does it truly translate into learning? So I think there's some big questions that we've been tackling, in our organization to really look at how do we start making shifts there? Because at the end of the day, what we're talking about is not only helping people advance in their careers, but also helping companies get business results faster. And there's a lot of change. I mean, it feels like the understatement of the year, but a lot of change going on right now. So being able to keep up with all of that is even more critical than it's been.
Yeah, it's definitely with the change, and there's no shortage of information out there. There's no shortage of, access, I think, to material necessarily. And as you're looking at learning from your peers or peer learning, micro learning, how do you make this or scale this to grow leaders, and how do you ensure that people get the right type of learning? What works from your perspective?
Yeah. So, well, you mentioned peer learning, micro learning. Both things are absolutely critical. So, a few years ago, we noticed this trend and people being just so distracted. There's less and less time. I think we're down to, people having an average of 24 minutes a week to spend on their development if they set aside any time at all. And that's a huge challenge, right? And those 24 minutes are typically interrupted 3 times. So it's a lot. When you're trying to develop people and people are trying to develop themselves, it's like, how do I actually make this work? So, one of the key things that we've really focused on is learning in the flow of work. So, that's really when we start talking about micro learning, that's what we're trying to get to is how can you fit things into your regular day. Learning becomes an everyday kind of thing versus like I gotta go set aside an hour, 2 hours, or I have to travel somewhere for a program, but being able to fit it in. So our platform actually has micro learning all through it. And micro in our case means 2 to 7 minutes long. And so, I mentioned I worked at Deloitte Consulting for a long time. And I think about the number of things my attention was divided across back then, right? So we have designed this with a pretty tough customer in mind, meaning someone who's got a lot going on. They're juggling quite a bit. They're constantly asking the question, is this going to be relevant, useful? Should I spend my time on this? So that's the kind of mindset we need to be thinking about as we're developing solutions for individuals because they're constantly making those trade-offs throughout and so the micro learning piece is really important, but not just to introduce an idea or challenge or perspective or provide them with a tool. It's also about just getting them to pause and think about how does this really play out for me? Like what's the relevance of this and how do I apply this in my job? Right. So translating from content to action is another component that has to be tied in. It's not just about the content. And so the relevance piece of this is critical. And then the other piece around peer learning is an important element as well, because when you look at peer to peer networks, and developing those relationships at the peer level, which a lot of times people don't necessarily focus on as much. They're, especially when you think about earlier in their careers, they're trying to just focus on their own work and what they got to get done and distinguishing themselves. And then as you continue to move up within organizations, those peer relationships become even more important in terms of getting the work done. And so the data shows, actually this data came out, I want to say in 2022, showing that if you can initiate those peer-to-peer connections earlier in someone's career, those disparities that you see in promotion rates across different groups disappear. So because there's not only that support that you're feeling from your peers, but also you're having the kinds of conversations, you're getting insights around different ways you should be thinking about things. So we tend to focus a lot more on the employee to manager relationship or getting sponsors, but the peer piece is really important as well. And so in our approach, in our platform, we leverage a cohort based model as well. I mean, new lines can be implemented in multiple ways, but the cohort piece is really critical too. And we're absolutely seeing the results of that, where you've got not only a safe space to go have the kind of conversations that you need to have, but also you get to share some of your best practices and lessons learned, and you get that from others as well. And so that self awareness goes up very quickly, and that learning and collaboration increases as well. So I think there's some very interesting opportunities.
And focusing on peer relationships, we spend a lot of time on emotional intelligence.
Yes, and yes, definitely, because there are different components of emotional intelligence. So self-awareness is a key piece of that, as well as understanding the impact that you have on others. I mean, those are, and also being able to regulate, right? Regulate. And so we have a module that's in New Lens, which is focused on building leadership courage and resilience. And there is a lot in there from an EQ standpoint. So part of it is recognizing those traps that you fall into when things don't go as planned and how do you show up, right? We have a lot around presence as well. So just recognizing, what does it look like to others in terms of, how you're showing up, how you're engaging with them. And so there are opportunities to get feedback from others as well as to just pause and reflect and get a sense of how am I affecting other people. And so as I mentioned, that cohort based discussion too really helps a lot because there are certain things that you might have as blind spots and now it starts to surface a lot more.
Yeah, I find it so fascinating, emotional intelligence, and you see it so often. And I just don't understand how leaders today still lack EI at times or have not had enough development around it because it really derails them. They only get to a certain point, or you see it on teams and you see it almost everywhere where it's always that one person that they're so intelligent yet they lack the ability to kind of self actualize or to
Mhm.
self assess and to like pause, as you mentioned, to really kind of take a step back without reacting. And no one's perfect, but if you, especially as you propel or excel in your position and continue to advance, you have such a significant impact on your team and the organization. And you really have to have a level of EI to be able to be an effective leader and to be respected and to be trusted and
Mhm.
to retain, your talent. In your cohorts, so is this within an organization or do you also do multi organizations or multi, cohorts, or is it typically within a team or within an organization?
Yeah, with our new lens implementations, those
Hmm.
have been more focused on within an organization, and it's interesting. So, like McKesson is one of the companies that has implemented New Lens. And what was interesting there is they used it as a way to drive cross functional learning and collaboration. So, kind of get you out of your silo, learn more about the business, and how so you're able to bring that broader context to your role, but also you've got this network of support and resources to get things done across the organization. So it's interesting not only from a career development standpoint, but also being successful in your role, but also having some confidential support outside of the group that you typically work in. We have also implemented New Lens. Actually, like one of the things that I'm very big on is giving back to the community. And so there's a fundraiser that we do, which is providing leadership development to individuals, and it's across a variety of different industries and companies, but it's all to raise money for grants for a particular nonprofit organization called Orchid Giving Circle. And so we have rolled it out there, and that's where it really, I mean, that touched a lot of different organizations, but the focus was around women and emerging leaders and helping them be successful. So it's really developing some of those foundational leadership skills and getting things on the radar that may not be on the radar for them. So it can work in both ways. It can absolutely work in both ways. So,
So that sounds exciting. We've done a lot of research around women in the workplace and advancing women. We held several summits, and then we switched over to DEI to integrate both. And so that was we'll probably be doing another one in this year coming. It's really been, so fascinated to learn from, all of them and their different stories and what got them to be successful and also kind of the lessons learned and the challenges along the way. And so it's a combination of learning and also a lot of laughs and
yes.
really great connections. Hopefully, maybe you can be part of it next time. It was, we've enjoyed it over the years. And
Yeah, sounds
I'd love to
fantastic.
learn more about your grant foundation. That sounds that it's rewarding as well.
Yes, yes, it is. I think one of the things that is so impactful here is the connections that people make, right? So there are, three things that we tend to focus on as we think about leadership development and or just developing those leadership skills that are going to be foundational at every level. There's content, there's coaching, and there's connection, right? And the content piece of it, I told you, it's got to be digestible, short and sweet. Got to be able to fit it in. the coaching piece of it, we have to think more broadly. It's not just bringing in external coaches. And so, thinking about how can you amplify that coaching from others, peer to peer level, whether they're from within the same organization or not, coaching from your manager as well, so that you don't end up in a situation where you haven't gotten feedback around something that now is going to be a limiting factor for you, because you were referencing that earlier. And then the connection piece is, it's tough to feel like you're alone, and especially when we talk about being in a hybrid workplace or maybe a completely remote workplace, and you might have been someone who just joined the organization. And so how are you going to develop those relationships? What are some of the ways you can do that? And so there's an opportunity here to not only have people learn and develop stronger skills in areas that are going to help them be successful, but at the same time, do it in a way where it is going to give them this network of support, not only during the program, but well beyond that. Right? Those are the three things that we integrate into our design, because it's absolutely critical. We're thinking about long-term success and sustaining high performance. So it's pretty exciting to think about the opportunities here, whether you do it within your own company or do it across a variety of different companies and industries. There's a lot to be learned and gained there.
And you mentioned it's building this pipeline of connections. So through your cohort, do you have a beginning and end, or is it just an ongoing group?
Yeah, so our typical model, so when we're rolling out new lens, and I'm just going to use this as a hypothetical example here. So let's say it's 100 people that you're putting into the program. So what we do is a launch with the entire group together. So we have a kickoff and set the stage for success. But then we break people out into their cohorts, and their cohorts would be about 4 to 6 individuals, right? So you've got the larger group experience and you've got the smaller group experience. And individually, people are going through New Lens and completing content. So it's developing a customized action plan for you as you're going through the program. So you and I, Rachel, could go in there. We could be in a cohort together, but individually we're going into the platform, and we have different needs, different expertise, strengths, all of that. So our plans are going to look different, but then we come together in our cohort once a month, and we've got discussion guides and tools to really drive that conversation. And so we get to go deeper with that content, reflect further, talk about how we're applying these things. And then most of our clients also add on webinars, so where we bring the entire group of 100 back together and we go deeper into some of the content, but really focusing more specifically around what's relevant for that particular group. Because within a particular topic area, like for example, communicating with influence and impact is one of our areas. There might be certain things that they see popping up over and over again that this particular group needs to address, meaning, areas where they get stuck, or maybe they're not as effective in terms of how they're communicating. And so that gives us a chance to dive in a bit deeper and be much more targeted in how we're doing that. So it's a pretty cool experience, a combination of individual and collaborative learning, and how we're leveraging the cohorts to really advance the learning.
Yeah, it definitely is. And as you're looking at leadership in the future, what do you think is going to set organizations that develop leaders or that have exceptional leaders? What's going to set them apart from the rest?
Well, I think it's continuing to recognize that learning isn't an event. It's something that needs to be embedded into the culture. And so there are different ways to think about it. So how do you reinforce that day-to-day coaching and learning from each other? How do you make it as easy as possible? Like the easy button is what I'm constantly thinking about. How do we make it easy for employees to engage and benefit from the learning? But the other thing is, especially when you start talking about large enterprises, how do you make it easy for HR to implement this stuff? Because you can have the best solution, but if you've got a bunch of challenges in terms of how hard it is to actually roll this out, that doesn't work either, right? So all of it is just kind of putting yourself in this place of thinking about how can I make it easy? And there's easy stuff that can be implemented on a day to day basis. So whether you're using technology or not, but frankly, I think technology introduces so many opportunities, right? Huge equalizer in terms of giving people access to things that they didn't have access to before, just at a whole other level. So I think that's another component, is making sure that you're thinking creatively about that and how can you use that to truly scale up. Because I think even just a small shift in performance across the masses in your company is huge, right? It's huge. I won't get into statistics and normal distributions, but one standard deviation of improvement would be incredible. So there's a huge opportunity there.
Especially at scale. And I've talked a lot about that, especially when we had our women in leadership summits, and we talked a lot about how doing small things over time have makes such a huge difference. So sometimes you
Yes.
feel like you're not getting anywhere, but as you continue and you make small impact, you'll start to see huge success or huge change. And so kind of sticking with that mindset, it really kind of helps when you're kind of just trying to get things done every day, where you sometimes feel like you're spinning your wheel. But over time, if you stick with it, and of course, you really need to kind of take and embrace change, and adapt and be innovative, because you don't want to be stuck doing the same things over time either. But it's a combination. And if you could give advice, or one piece of advice for a chief HR officer or chief learning officer to impact or to amplify the impact of coaching across their organization, what would you recommend that they start with?
Well, I think, part of it's just coming back to what I was saying earlier, that this whole thing around everyday learning and a coaching culture. One of the things that we implemented recently is just, taking leaders through coaching skills development, right? So really thinking about coaching skills as a way to develop capabilities in others. And so there are a variety of different ways that you can actually do that, but just looking at what are a couple of small things that we can do consistently to drive bigger results. So I think the everyday learning piece, if you can integrate something in there, whether it's just like, hey, we're going to spend 5 minutes talking about what are some things that we're doing really well and how do we amplify that, or looking at how are we going to use AI to help us move forward a little bit faster on a couple of things, or challenge our perspective. I mean, these are all like little things that you can integrate. But I think, technology is one key piece, as I was mentioning. And so, how do we help people use technology to advance that learning on a day to day basis? But ultimately, the goal that I guess I'm recommending that people keep in mind is, how do we create a culture of learning? And it happens one interaction at a time, one person at a time. There's stuff that we can all do starting today. As small steps lead to big results, as you were referencing as well. That's all over our platform too. It's like, just get started, do something. You don't have to wait for the giant program to develop and implement. There's a lot you can do just right now. Just make a decision on what it is and get started.
Right. I think it's a mindset shift, because you're always learning, right? And if you think about, and the more that you connect with peers, or you leverage that type of learning, or just learning about what they're doing in their role, or learning about, and maybe they solved a problem, and with technology advancing so quickly, learning from each other how they're leveraging the newest AI tool, and if that's a good fit for you, maybe it helps save you time in having to do your own research maybe on that topic, and you can share something else that you're doing in return to help. Like, I remember when we read.ai, when we started using that in our virtual platforms, and then before that was another tool, I think Otter. I got
Yeah.
that one of our clients at one of their events, and that was very new, but it keeps on shifting. It's just stuff like that. You keep building and sharing. It will help, and also that's part of your learning, which is happening every minute of the day now. It's just exciting, but I think also kind of formulating what you're learning and being able to share that, will kind of, I think that's our next phase, and being able to kind of condense some of what we're
Hmm.
hearing, all right, and we're starting to do that. but I think there's like another evolution of how we even.
Yes, definitely. I think there's a big difference between doing versus learning. And sometimes we're so busy doing, going from one thing to the next. And are we really taking a moment to reflect and think about what did we just learn? Whether it's about that particular individual that we were meeting with or about the subject matter, like what does this mean? Like what's the so what of what just happened is really what I'm getting at here. And that doesn't take a long time. Sometimes it's just more about carving out a couple minutes and just making sure that you're doing that before you jump to the next thing.
That's good advice. And Nina, if anyone would like to, or if our listeners and viewers would like to learn more about your New Lens leadership platform or you, what's the best way that they can reach you?
Well, the New Lens website is newlensleadership.com. So, definitely feel free to check that out. We've got videos and other information that's out there. And then also my email address is out there too. So, feel free to reach out that way. And I would also encourage people to follow me on LinkedIn. I am constantly publishing in Forbes, Fast Company. We are big on putting research out there and sharing information that's valuable to individuals, but also just some of the challenges and solutions. So I'm constantly putting things there. So just follow me at Neena Newberry.
Great. Thank you, Nina. Have a great rest of the day. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thank you so much.